Welcome to Cool Cat Teacher Talk, where we talk about what matters in the classroom.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
Hello, I'm Vicki Davis, and this is an Epic Elementary Supershow, sponsored by Class Composer. For the next hour, we've brought together some of our most popular conversations with top experts on the topics elementary teachers care about most. We'll talk about executive functioning and administrators' take on how to organize classes for success, differentiated math instruction, the science of reading, gamification, and more. Whether you're driving to school, prepping in your classroom, or relaxing at home, get ready for some strategies that you can use tomorrow. We're going to start with something that affects everything else in your classroom: executive functioning. Dr. Sarah Oberle is going to help us understand why some students struggle with attention, organization, and flexibility, and what we can do about it. Let's dive in.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
Today, I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Sarah Oberle. She is a seasoned primary educator and cognitive science expert. She focuses on turning the science of learning into practical classroom-ready strategies. Sarah was introduced to me by a previous guest, Blake Harvard, and I'm so glad that he connected us. She has a book called Executive Functions for Every K through 3 Classroom that's coming out March 2026. Sarah, help us understand, what is executive functioning and why would we care about that for our youngest kids?
Executive functioning really is a set of cognitive processes that we all have. And in a nutshell, they are responsible for any type of self-control that we use to direct any kind of goal that we want to meet. And when I say goal, that could be anything from getting a degree to remembering everything that you wanted to bring in the car with you to getting dressed in the morning. If you're a student, it might be getting your belongings organized. That we rely on our executive functions to help us work through all the tasks during the day that we really need some self-control to successfully work through. There are 6 cognitive processes that fall under the executive function umbrella, and they are split into 2 groups. So the first group is the core executive functions, and they are the first to develop. Those 3 are working memory, inhibition, and cognitive flexibility. And those tend to show up toddler through early elementary. After those develop successfully, the higher order executive functions start to develop, and those 3 are problem solving, reasoning, and planning. So depending on if you're a teacher, depending on what grade you teach, you're going to be focused on different areas of executive functioning. For teachers, everything that we do is dependent on our students' ability to use their executive functions. Anything from organization to paying attention to self-control in terms of not putting your hands on someone or not calling out, controlling your impulses. All of that is what our students need to then be academically successful. If they are unable to focus, to listen, to avoid distraction, temptation, it doesn't really matter how well we teach them or how much they know, they are going to be unable to demonstrate that in the way that we are looking. That's why executive functions are so important for teachers to understand, at least at surface level, because there are things that we can tweak in our own instruction, in our classroom environment, in our behavior management, things that we can do to mitigate or offload any of the undue stress that we might be putting on our students' executive functions.
As a mom who has kids who have learning differences, largely working memory issues, I think sometimes we as teachers forget that long multi-part instructions are just not necessarily something that a younger child can do. So can we break these down? Let's start with working memory. What are things that teachers can do to help that or not overtax a younger child? Where do you start with that?
Understanding the basics of working memory is helpful because you start to be able to peel back the layers of all the hidden jobs that our students are given, which taxes their working memories. It's not just remembering directions. It's not just the content that you have to remember to do the assignment. It's all of that wrapped together. And our working memory is very limited. It is limited in how much it can hold at one time and for how long it can maintain information. We're talking about being very succinct and brief with our directions. If you're giving them instructions for an independent activity and expecting them to go off and do it, and then you get distracted and, a minute goes by, some of those directions that they're trying to maintain have started to fade. You want to think about giving directions just before your students are going off to do work, finding ways to have visual reminders. And so I teach first grade. A lot of my students are non-readers, so sometimes that means pictures, sometimes it means signals, sometimes I'll allow my students to draw something or make their own notations that work for them to offload working memory. So we want to think about when we're teaching, how much are we expecting our students to process at any one time and for how long? That's why it's so important to give brief bursts of instruction and then review or break down your assignments, your assessments, so that students aren't maintaining information. We really want them to be using their working memory to complete the task. We want to get those administrative type things off of their minds so that whatever they have available, they can use for the actual learning activity.
I know that when some children I've worked with have become readers, we would make little checklists of, okay, these are the things you need to check before you turn in the paper. Have you put your name on the paper? Checked this, checked that, because remembering the procedures, but then also completing the task. I think your point is just so important for all of us teachers to remember. I've seen, people give 10 minutes worth of instruction and I'm thinking, how can kids remember it? I can't remember that. You also talk about inhibition. How do you help kids there?
So when we think about inhibition, we're thinking about preventing ourselves from doing something that's disruptive or going to prevent us from reaching our goal, whatever that is. In the context of school, particularly younger students, we're thinking about not shouting out, not running across the room, no pushing, hitting, or even touching someone, particularly the little ones, they do all kinds of things. So the ability to control that. However, inhibition is also essential for attention. If I need to focus on something, I also, at the same time, need to filter out anything else that my senses are perceiving or anything else is on my mind. When we as teachers understand the demand that's being put on inhibitory processes, we can do things, remove distractions as much as we possibly can. Keep materials away until our students need them. Think about our seating. I have tables in my classroom. Many of us have tables. You want your students to be turned around looking at you, or you are really making it harder for them if you give them the choice. Just being cognizant of that process and the work that our students' minds have to do is helpful in just our minute-to-minute decision-making in the classroom.
I've often heard that elementary teachers really understand the cognitive load that filling up every single square inch of wall in the classroom does to kids. I always thought, hey, the more decoration, the better. But that's not necessarily the case, is it?
I'm glad you brought that up. And I have always felt like I want my classroom to look inviting and cozy and warm. And we still can have that because I think if I tell any teacher that they have to completely minimize their decor and their posters and their lights or whatever cool things they have out now, they're going to probably not listen to anything I have to say. So I always say, no one is saying that your room has to be sterile, but you can be strategic about where you put things. Anything novel or exciting, we are reflexively drawn to. So if you're driving and there's something new on the side of the road, your attention pulls you to that, wants to alert you to that. For our students, the same thing. So if you're hanging up their craft or their work or whatever, put it in a place that doesn't compete for their visual field. Put it in a different spot, a different wall. If you got a really cute decoration, great. Put it in a place where it is not going to force their inhibitory processes to work overtime, trying to say, okay, I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to look at this, or I'm going to think about this and not that. And even acoustically, some teachers want to play music, that's fine. Play instrumental music. because
Oh.
any kind of music with language, we cannot help but try to listen, even if it's not in our own language. We are reflexively built to try to decipher that. So now we are creating another barrier for our students or another job for their executive functions.
So cognitive flexibility, what's that?
Cognitive flexibility is your ability to adapt to things that are unexpected, your ability to understand other people's perspectives, to understand why someone else would have a different perspective, and then to consider what their perspective is. If you think about toddlers and how easily they get upset about the smallest things, it makes a lot of sense because they haven't developed this process where they can just kind of say, you know what, I really wanted my sandwich cut like this, and you cut it like that, and that's okay. Instead, it rocks their world in the moment because I wanted it this way. You didn't do it, and now they're very upset. And the way that this manifests in my context in early elementary is schedule changes. Some of the kids will have a hard time where there's a fire drill and suddenly we're thrown off and they have a hard time adjusting back to whatever we were working on in the moment. Socially, cognitive flexibility is super important because you can imagine if you're trying to play with someone, for example, or if you're older, just trying to get together with a friend, they're not always going to want to do what you want to do. And you have to understand that and be okay with that to maintain sort of these expected behaviors in social situations. If you are rigid in your thinking, if you have a hard time conceding to anyone else, that's going to put a strain on your ability to form those friendships, to get along with your peers.
How do you help with cognitive flexibility?
There's a couple of different ways you can think about this. One thing you can do is talk about the fact that people have different perspectives and that it is okay. You can kind of front load the idea that even if this is not an issue for you now, this may happen. Just anticipating some of these scenarios that might come up and talking about, let's think about if that happens, what can we do? And what might not be helpful for us to do. In addition to talking about, I'm going to be out tomorrow. There's going to be a substitute. Is everything going to be okay? Of course it is. Here's what's going to happen. I don't know who it's going to be. We can't prepare them for everything, but we can prepare them for the feeling of being surprised, of having to deal with a change, of having to adapt, of feeling like, I don't get why this person wants to do that. That's not what I want to do. That's the best we can do is say there are changes in life. You're not always going to have what you want or get your way. And we need to start to sit with the idea that that's okay.
So tell us a little bit about your book.
The book was born out of actually another book. So my co-author, Mitch Weathers, wrote a book about executive functions, specifically for classroom practice, but for middle and secondary grades. I knew Mitch and jokingly said, we need this down in elementary. This is our number one problem. It's not that they don't understand the content. It's we can't even get them to pay attention to us or to maintain attention, do the things that they need to do school, as we say, those qualities of studentness. They're disorganized, they forget things. So I jokingly said, we need this. And he said, well, I'm the secondary guy, I can't help you. So a couple years later, I had studied a lot on working memory in my doctoral program. So we said, let's go for it. My colleagues, this is what we talk about all the time. I felt like this was lacking, particularly for us. The book is the actual science. We don't get too technical, but it talks about what executive functions are, not as behaviors, because that's a common misconception. Executive functions are not behaviors. The behaviors that we associate with the executive functions are sponsored by our executive functions, but executive functions themselves are cognitive processes. So we talk about the science, but we don't go too in depth. And then we say, this is what this can look like for you. We give specific classroom scenarios and specific examples of here's what you can do. Throughout the book, though, we make it clear that no one can prescribe for you what you should and shouldn't do in your classroom. You are the expert of your setting, your group of students. The book is meant to say, here's this body of knowledge that we think you should have been privy to. This is not just MTSS 2, or it's not just special education. It's for the music teacher. It's for the gen ed teacher. It's for anybody. The point we want to make is we're giving you examples to give you some context so you can understand like, oh, okay, I see what they mean. I see they tried this. But we want you to take this knowledge so that you can professionalize your own decision making in your own setting.
Excellent. Dr. Sarah Oberle, I love that you're in the first grade classroom, but that you're also studying this. I think some of the best research and books come out of the classroom. So you're doing this every day. Thanks for coming on the show and thanks for talking about executive functioning. I've learned a lot to even apply in my high school classroom. So thank you.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
Dr. Sarah Oberle reminds us that before we can teach content, we need to understand how our students' brains are developing. Those 6 executive functions, working memory, inhibition, cognitive flexibility, problem solving, reasoning, and planning, are the foundation of everything else is built upon. Speaking of foundations, how you set up your classroom matters more than you might think. In this piece, Administrator Carrie Hetzel shares strategies for creating a classroom environment that sets students up for success from day one. Today, we have a veteran elementary principal with us. Carrie Hetzel is the principal for Paradise Canyon Elementary School in California, serving over 700 students from transitional kindergarten through 6th grade. She's been the principal since 2018, and in that time, the school has been California Distinguished School many times, most recently 2023, and was a National Blue Ribbon School in 2021. We're wanting to talk about how do you work hard to create a balanced classroom that will help students and teachers be successful.
It's a very complicated process, as you might imagine. Having a big school and several classes per grade level, it's important to set our students up for success and have really balanced classes for our teachers. One of the things we were talking about earlier was how it's progressed over time as well. One helpful tool we used this past year was called Class Composer. And it's one piece of a very large puzzle to make sure that not only our classes are balanced, but making sure that all of our data gets updated regularly. And that's one of the great things that has been challenging because things change and we have to change data and make sure that we're still staying balanced in our classrooms with boys, girls, student behaviors, IEPs, 504s, REL students, all the things that go into making up a great class and making sure that classes are balanced, making sure our students are in the right spot for the coming school year.
You're really setting the students and the teachers up for success. So what is your ideal classroom? It sounds like you said balance. So when you look at a class and you go, oh yes, I feel good about this, like what does that class look like?
We want to have a variety of students, all different levels and abilities, boys and girls, personalities. There are students that may click that should be together. There's students that may have had a conflict that should be separated that next year. All those really important pieces. And as we look at the classes, we are constantly reflecting. It goes through quite a process of teachers looking at classes, me looking at the classes, the counselor looks at the classes. It's really a group effort here with the staff. As we make changes, one of the things I was talking about with the Class Composer, to recalculate all that data that we get on our students, it can be really cumbersome to go back if we make, one slight change of a class and then you have to recalculate all your data. We utilized the tool Class Composer this year, and as we made changes or added a student or switched 2 students, we were able to see that data in real time calculate instead of us manually having to go in and make another analysis. Class Composer did that for us. And so that tech tool really saved us a lot of time on a very labor intensive process that we go through every year.
It sounds like you were able to kind of move things around and look at the results. If so many schools, it is a manual process. You've been doing this since 2018. Like how much time when you did it by hand did it typically take you?
And hours, and many, many hours, especially with all of the grade levels we have. Having a tool that really sped up that process while still maintaining our own voice and not just putting things into a machine and pressing go, but being able to put our data in and then as we changes, having that update for us. Just that one piece really saved us a lot of time, allowed us time for other things. It was a great tool for us to use. And then we usually keep data on all of our students, obviously. And so having that really easily go to the teachers and for them to see a snapshot of their students before they walk into the door. So they have pictures of the kids and can see who's going to be coming into their class and who they need to support.
So many times people say, oh, we're just going to have the computer do it. But computers especially elementary, there is a lot of nuance there. There's a lot of emotional intelligence from the teachers and from principal required to create a good effective classroom that's a win-win for everybody, isn't it?
It's obviously different in high school when the master schedule is very complicated, but in elementary school especially, we really need to have people doing that. Like you mentioned, the nuance and the slight difference of personalities, or who might be really successful in this class and who needs something else. All those things that really need to be done by people that know the students and know what they need. And we want every year to be the best year. Some years are more challenging than others. So if we need to make changes or adjustments, we do that all the time. So you can see who's in what class, and if there are certain kids that shouldn't be with each other the next year, it won't let you put them in there. So if you make a change and you had a kiddo that needed a break from another, it's really nice to have a little extra safety check alert. It allows you to do it if you want to, but it gives you a little alert that says, you're going to make a change that you said shouldn't be changed. Just those safety checks and things like that are really, really helpful.
So if you could travel back in time to Carrie Hetzel, day one, new principal, what would you tell her about creating classes that you wished maybe you had known back then?
Start early. We end in June, so we're definitely in the process in May because it's not something to rush. It's really important, and we want to make sure it's thoughtful and purposeful. The end of the school year gets so busy with end of year activities, and the teachers are so busy. So starting early and taking your time is really important.
And I'm sure that could be tricky conversations because you also don't want children labeled. So there's always that piece. Do you feel like you're able to handle that aspect and keep it positive?
It's actually a really positive experience. Yeah. It's just data and information. And a lot of it is personality or not at all labeling or just trying to make sure that if we have students that have special needs or students that have a second language, that we are able to spread them out so, the teacher can get to everybody. We want everybody to have a little bit of something in their classroom. And so it really helps us with that process. It's just us being humans, and these teachers have had the students all year long. They know them very well. I see a bigger picture because I've seen them over several years. So I have a different point of view. Our counselor has a different point of view. So that's why it takes a process of going through teacher revision, principal revision, counselor revision, definitely a team effort to make sure students are where they're supposed to be.
So as we finish up, Carrie, I want you to think about all the principals across the country and beyond who do what you do and groan when they think about setting up classes. What is your encouragement to principals as they prepare for this? Because it's really important.
I think it's a positive experience. It really starts you thinking about the new school year. You get to reflect on how far the students have come this school year. You're seeing their growth. It's really positive, and I think it can be hopefully not looked upon as negative because it's always exciting to start the new school year. And it gives a fun thing about school and the way that we work our school system is that every year is like a fresh start. Every year is a new beginning. I think it's a really positive experience, and that's why it's so important to have great classes. So these students are starting off on the right foot in a great environment with peers that they can learn from and learn with. So I think it's a really positive kind of new beginning.
So we'll include a link to Class Composer in the show notes. And Carrie Hetzel, principal at Paradise Canyon Elementary School, thank you for helping us talk about preparing to have a great school year next year. The things that we don't really talk about this a lot, that it really does make a difference as those classes are set up. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
Now that we've talked about how to set up classrooms for success and we've talked about how young minds work, let's go to one of the subjects that challenges both teachers and students, math. Dr. Carol Ann Tomlinson is one of the most respected voices in differentiated instruction. She's the chair of Education Leadership Foundation and Policy at the University of Virginia and author of Everybody's Classroom. I sat down with her and asked the question every elementary teacher wants answered. Can you really differentiate math instruction for our youngest learners? Let's listen in. We are talking with Dr. Carol Tomlinson, Chair of Education Leadership, Foundation, and Policy at the University of Virginia. We're focusing on elementary, kindergarten. Can you actually differentiate instruction for math for younger students?
I think you have to. And I think that's probably the game plan all the way through school. I think there are things that all of the kids need to do together in math, but think any teacher who's been in the classroom 15 minutes knows that just because we thought kids could learn something in 2 days doesn't mean they all did. And some of them already knew it. And some of them really are going to need considerably more time than that. Yes, I talk about this often in terms of highways and exit ramp. The highway is the time all the kids should be together, thinking about numbers or a little higher up, trying to figure out what multiplication has to do with addition or what that might mean if you're multiplying popcorn or whatever it is you're doing. And all the kids need to be in math conversations with the whole group or turn and talk with 2 people, but still in the whole group. And they need to be part of seeing themselves being mathematical thinkers. It's really important for kids to see themselves as part of the whole class. We're a team of learners, and I'm part of that team. And all kids need to see interesting demonstrations by the teacher about whatever they're talking about. They need to share their answers and explain how they got there. They need to try out things with a partner. And so the whole class aspect of math instruction and everything else, I think, is critically important. We are an us, and we need to be an us a lot of the time. But then there are times consistently where some kids need to spend a little bit more time on something. Some go back and patch up things or don't have the prerequisite skills they need. And some kids learn in different ways and would do much better if they could use a different mode of learning. And some kids are ready to move ahead. So the highway needs to have periodic exit ramps, and by predictable and frequent, not once every 2 weeks, part of every day, so that kids can work on things they're interested in or things that take them to their next step or try out new ideas with peers.
So fill in the blank for me, Carol. As teachers differentiate math instruction and the elementary grades, the biggest mistake they could make is blank.
I think teaching it as an algorithm, teaching it as this is what we're doing, this is how you do it, now do it, versus having conversations about how that makes sense to you, why you do something, and what other ways you can do it. And look how cool it is that we can get the same answer 4 or 5 different ways, and everybody can explain it, and we learn more that way. So one group had to determine how many students were in their class that day, how many people are here. Those little guys were adorable to watch. They're walking around counting people who are moving at the same time. They're moving, a little faded, but that was not a surprise. And then you'd see them counting as they knew to count, 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, 11. And so the numbers were just all over the place. The conversation she had with them was wonderful. She went through each of the kids. Tell us how many people you thought were here today. How did you get that number? Do you think more people are here today than Jack does, or does Jack think there are more people than you? Oh, did you all get the same answer? No. Should we all get that same answer? Yeah. But then some kid would say, not if somebody left to go to the office. And then she ended up by saying, since you didn't get the same answer, do you think it would be worth doing this again tomorrow and trying again and see how we are thinking about it? They thought that was a great idea. And the conversation really positioned them as mathematical thinkers. She did the same thing with the second group, pretty much the same questions. That group was supposed to figure out how many kids were there and how many kids were absent. And of course, it's much harder to count something that's not there. They talked about that. They talked about greater than, less than, how they had gotten there. And she did the same thing again with them. And she also, after the how did you get your answer, forgotten what the other question was, but it had to do really with their next step in reasoning. And then a third group had to count how many boys were there, how many boys were absent, how many girls were there, and how many girls were absent. And the one question she asked them that was different than the others was, explain to us how you know you're right. The other kids, investigation with numbers, thinking about numbers, finding different ways to do things by listening to each other. But this group, even at that age, was ready to say, I'm right because I know this and explain it. It was a wonderful way to have all the kids together for the lead-in, different tasks for them to do at a center, and then conversations that accepted where they were and pushed them on a little bit further. And one thing I love about it is when he pauses and it's obvious that he didn't hear what she said, that doesn't bother the teacher. She says, okay, what she says was this and this. How do you feel about that? And he thinks about it for a minute. He said, she's beginning to make me think I was wrong. So she caused you to rethink and to understand more deeply. Yes, ma'am, I think she did. And of course, that's a cycle that they'll keep going through. But that, I think, is an example of a classroom where all of the kids are sharing good and exciting, interesting beginning instruction and asked to do work that pushes them on a bit, and then are talked with as though they're really mathematical thinkers, because that's what they're trying to do.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
Highways and exit ramps. Treat them as mathematical thinkers. Dr. Tomlinson reminds us that differentiation isn't about separating students into permanent groups or labeling them. It's about meeting them where they are every single day. Now, let's turn to the skill that unlocks everything else, reading. We have two incredible experts for you. First, Malia Hollowell shares brain-friendly strategies from the science of reading. Then, Jennifer Burns teaches us how to build a reader from playground to print. Here we go with Malia.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
So excited today to be talking to Malia Hollowell. We're going to be talking about reading. So her website is play-doh-to-plato.com, and she is the author of The Science of Reading in Action, Brain-Friendly Strategies Every Teacher Needs to know. So what are these brain-friendly strategies for reading?
This is my favorite subject, Vicki, and I'm so excited to share just a couple of them. One of them is taking our sight words or our spelling words and actually sorting them by phonics and spelling rule. When I learned how to teach reading, I didn't learn a whole lot. I'm of the era back in the early 2000s where we were told that students can magically learn how to read by just looking at books that they're interested in. And of course, now we know that is not true. We have 7 decades of research that have proven that is just not the way that most students will learn how to read. They really need us as teachers to help them connect the dots. And so taking our sight words and our spelling lists and sorting them is one of these simple little tweaks that we can make that will help them connect the dots a lot faster and a lot easier. So what you're going to do is take your list, and rather than having students learn these words in the order that you're given them, you are going to sort them by the phonics or spelling rule that is the primary focus of that word.
A lot of times, can you get these word lists just already pre-sorted for teachers? Because I know one thing about AI, it's terrible at alphabetic and it cannot do the phonics. That's just the fact of where we are.
Yes, we've actually tried to use AI for writing decodable passages based on one phonics or spelling rule, and it is a disaster. Yes, I agree with you. We're not there yet, but yes, we have pre-sorted lists that teachers are able to download from our site, and it will do all of the heavy lifting for them. So they don't have to sit for hours and try and figure out where the word said belongs in the sequence.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so what's another brain-friendly rule?
Well, let's stick with sight words here because I know that a lot of teachers are required to teach them in their classroom, either sight words or spelling words, and this will work for both. So I was taught that when we are having students learn these words and memorize these words so that they can recognize them when they see them in books or in text, that we need to give them a stack of flashcards and we need them to drill those flashcards 5 times a day, every single day, all week long. And what we now know is that is not how students memorize words. We do not use our visual memory. Instead, we have a human superpower for spoken language. We have this magical ability as humans, when we're born, to be placed in the middle of a home and listen to the people around us speaking and communicating. And we can naturally learn how to understand what they're saying and then speak back to them. So we want to use that to our advantage as teachers. Once you learn about the research, it does make sense. It's almost like you hear these facts and you think, well, yeah, of course. Why aren't we doing it that way? It's a remembering rather than a mind-blowing revelation.
Yeah. Okay, you got a third?
Yes, I'll actually stick with dyslexia since that is personally relevant to you and your family. So what we actually know is that on average, 20% of our human population will be affected by some level of dyslexia. That is important for educators in particular to know because learning how to support our dyslexic students is essential. We're going to have 1 out of 5 students on average in any classroom affected by dyslexia. So it's really important that every single teacher on this planet is able to effectively support them. And the good news is that dyslexia support is actually going to benefit all kids. We know helps them is to focus on the sounds. Dyslexia is actually largely an auditory processing difficulty. And so when babies are born, within hours of them being born, they can put electrical wiring on their head and measure how the baby is processing sound. And they'll be able to predict with incredible accuracy whether or not that child will be affected by dyslexia because they will process the sound differently.
So let's give a pep talk to reading teachers everywhere, as even parents. Like, what's your encouragement for that? It's not always easy to teach reading. It takes time and it's a process.
Yes, absolutely. I find great comfort in the research that shows that with brain-friendly strategies and tools in place, 95% of students can learn to read by the end of first grade. Knowing that with the right research-based strategies, we are able to help every single child in class become a thriving, successful reader is incredibly empowering, and it gives us hope. Yes, we may need to lean into the research. We may need to learn about the science of reading and make some tweaks and changes to our curriculum and our lesson plans. But once we do that, once we have our system in place, we will be able to benefit these children not only this year, but for years to come. Every class that comes through our doors is going to benefit from the time that we're taking now to learn what is best practice.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
With the right strategies, 95% of students can learn to read by the end of first grade. It's not wishful thinking. That's 7 decades of research. Now let's hear from literacy consultant Jennifer Burns, author of Building Readers from Playground to Print, on her fundamental 4 builds for every reader. You're observing students. So you're kind of saying, hey, we need a unique approach to every student. What does that look like in the classroom?
I call them the fundamental 4 builds. And that is seeing like a reader, hearing like a reader, thinking like a reader, and believing I am a reader. And when you're seeing like a reader, you're training the eyes. To hear would be ear training. Thinking is the mindset. And then believing you are a reader is transitioning and shifting that reader who doesn't believe it's their job to sit and read. It's everybody else's job. It's just not theirs. When you're thinking about eye training, the reason why I use playground to print is if you took your kids to the playground and you opened up the car and they would go play, they would make decisions about where to go based on their self-absorbed nature, their joys, desires, what they like. They actually bring that same style of decision-making into reading. So they look wherever they want, which is why they say is for said, because there's an I and an S in is. Letters and words work like identical twins. So if you think about an identical twins, you see the similarities before you see the differences. So in a letter, you see the D and the B and you think, oh, they both have circles and lines. So, well, I can say any one of them. They're easy to confuse. There was a little girl I was working with in a school and she was sitting at the back and the teacher was like, whoa, this is not the kid to call on. So I leaned back and I gave her the answer. Like, this is the letter M. It says, what's the letter M? Yeah, you knew it. What's the letter M? You knew that all along. And she's like, I did? Yes, you did. You knew that all along. So you're hearing my language because you've got in the back of their head this parent that's saying, you don't know, you're not going to be a reader. I like to call it the literacy life of a child. When you start to look at the child from that viewpoint, it's an amazing lens because you start to take their entire day and say, how did they experience literacy? Giving too much power to curriculum, we take a lot of power away from the teacher. How many times haven't you heard, it's not the curriculum that you purchase, it's the teacher that matters the most? We hear things like, oh, this is a science of reading curriculum that if you do it, it will be the cure. And if it's not, it's not your fault, it's the kid's fault, right? And so we can't give that kind of power away to curriculum. How do we utilize your curriculum while maintaining the focus on students and their literacy life?
You can't script personalization. You can't script differentiation. The whole principle behind it is that you're working with each unique learner.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
Whether you're teaching reading or math, it comes back to knowing your students and meeting them where they are. Now, do you want to know how to make all of this more engaging? Heather Mars has 5 steps to gamify your classroom that will have your students excited to learn. Here's a very popular back episode of the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. Today, we're talking with 12-year educator Heather Mars about how we can get gamifying our elementary classroom with 5 ways to get us started. So where do we start?
Gamifying was something that was introduced to me by Tisha Richmond. The first thing I always tell people when they want to gamify in their classroom is that they really need to land on a theme. That can be difficult for elementary. Tisha really loved doing like great food truck race, and she has one master chef because she taught in the culinary classroom. I ended up with space exploration because I thought about what is the one thing every year that my students just cannot wait to learn about. Another thing about theme is to try not to pick something that is fleeting, like Pokemon Go or even Harry Potter. It's nice to have a theme that is large enough that you can really work within it, something that won't go away next year when you want to gamify again. I developed characters in my classroom, so they had different levels that they could be at. They started off as a trainee. We were part of the space exploration department. I'm getting my kids involved, and their mission is to find this planet that's going to essentially save human life. So my students became the characters in our gamification. They started out as trainees, and as we moved through the game and they earned XP or experience points, they became astronaut, pilot, mission specialist. And each level gives them some sort of privilege in the classroom. They earn experience points in the classroom through multiple different ways. You want to have a format when you are thinking of how to give your students experience points. My format was if they were a peer leader that week, if they turned in all of their work and they followed the expectations, then they would get 100 XP for that week. We did side missions, which were things that they could take home and do and bring back to school. And I would launch about one side mission a month, which wasn't homework. It was additional things. We did an about me, some additional animal research. We did some things that were on top of our normal academics, and they could bring that in. It was optional. We played mini games in the classroom, Kahoot and Quizlet Live, and students who would win would earn XP for that. So there's lots and lots of different ways that they could earn XP in the classroom in order to level up. I had some students who were difficult to motivate toward the bottom of the pack, but I never actually showed them the whole list. So that's another thing that I tell people often is I don't show the kids below the top 10 as far as who is in what order on the XP list. They get to know what level they're at, but they don't get to see the full class rankings. So the fourth thing would be the onboarding. So getting your students excited and launching your game. So I always launch the game the first day of school. The reason for that is because the game is overlaid on top of everything that we do in our classroom all year long. I wouldn't want to wait until the second week of school to launch this. I want them interested right away. I create a video using iMovie. It has a pretend launch. It talks about Earth's running out of resources and we need you. And it really draws them into the game and gets them excited. And then I give them just a little bit of information, but not everything. I tell them they're going to be trainees. They're going to be part of the space exploration program, that they can earn XP, which kids just know what XP is. But they're like, what? We're going to have XP at school? Are you kidding me? Also, for our younger students, having something tangible for them to get into the game. My students wore name badges. I went online and found a free badge creation site and made little NASA name badges that had their picture on it, that they were a trainee. It had a little barcode and everything. It was very official looking. It has a little clip, the little plastic name tag. When they came to school, they'd get it out of their desk, they'd put it on. And that badge was who they were in our classroom. They were a trainee. And then as they leveled up, I'd give them little icons to put on their badge that would show that they were now a payload specialist or they were now a mission specialist. That was their identifier in the game. My gamification goes throughout the year because as elementary, we have our students all year long. Some of my secondary friends, they do it one game per quarter. Sometimes I need to spice it up a bit because it does go on for quite a while. Last year when I was gamifying, I did a side game where my students participated in developing a lemonade stand. So as a group, they got to design, develop, create the whole business plan for a lemonade stand. And we worked on it for 3 weeks. And then they had an opportunity where they got to set up their presentation, what their business plan was, what their lemonade stand would look like, what materials they needed to start their business. And other staff members in our building came through and got to listen to them present their business plan. And they got play money. So they got to invest in certain students' businesses. And then whichever business had the most investment at the end of our little side game, they got a certain number of XP per student.
So, Heather, do you feel like gamification was worth the effort? Did it have a positive impact on student learning?
Yes, 100%. Especially impactful for my students who are hard to engage, looking for something in school that doesn't exist there in our traditional sense. Especially, I found that my boys, my high energy boys, were incredibly engaged by gamifying. I was able to push them academically further than I would have normally.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
Gamification isn't about making learning easy. It's about making it engaging. When students are invested, they rise to the challenge. And speaking of rising to the challenge, Ezera Washington has achieved a remarkable 91% proficiency with her students. Not with a magic curriculum, not with extra funding, with dedication, research-based best practices, and an unwavering belief in her students. Here's her story. Teacher Ezera Washington in Paterson, New Jersey in 2024 helped her students achieve a 91% proficiency on the English language arts portion of the test. This is an amazing 40% increase from the prior year. But if you look at what the National Literacy Institute says, that 70% of low-income fourth graders can't read at a basic level in the U.S., Ezera, how did you do this?
I think when people see or they enter a school that they think might be low performing, they're already like ruling their kids out. My initial step was, let me get to know my kids. Let me see what they like, what they don't like. That's not, oh, what's your favorite color? It's, hey, what's your favorite book? Building relationships off of respect and high expectations. That's where I started. So then in that process, my kids started to tell me how they like to learn. So I think that getting to know them allowed them to feel comfortable to say, hey, I do better if I can listen to an audio first, and then we can decode the words. Or, hey, I do better if I can read the book by myself first, and then you call on me out loud. So it was like getting to know my kids first, and then like keeping that high expectation. For sure. That was just one.
You have to relate to educate. These kids will never do more than you expect them to. So have very high expectations. What does a typical day look like of reading instruction?
I'm very transparent on where they are. So they start the school year with an assessment. And the assessment tells me their reading level. So a lot of them were like second grade, kindergarten, third grade. And I'm like, all right, this is fifth grade. Let's go. We hit the ground running, be transparent. Here's your reading level. Here is the goal. Here's some things we're going to get to it. And then also informing the parents. I really feel like our results came from the community, of the relationship with parents. Hey, here's where your kid is. This is what I'm doing in the classroom. Here's what you could do at home to help. Whatever skill we were learning that week, I would teach in small groups. If the skill was main idea, before getting to the fifth grade text, say if you were on a second or third grade, I will pull a second or third grade text from the curriculum, and I will teach you main idea from that text first in small group, so that next week when we got to main idea, I could push comprehension of the story and not have to teach the skill. So I taught the skill of the week is small group. So all my friends who are reading on second grade level, we're teaching main idea based off of this text, second grade. So that next week when we got to our fifth grade story, you already know the skill main idea. Now I'm going to push universal prompts to get you to understand the content. My next group was third grade. My next group was fourth grade. And then my scholars who were already on grade level, that were already on fifth grade, they got exposed to the text the week of. And then prior to that, they would do probably like more writing. They would do compare and contrast writing, like skills that would be something that they could do.
We try not to label children.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a balance there. So how did a conversation go with, let's say that child is Joe?
I always start with, hey, Joe, how's your day going? How do you feel about reading? How are you doing in class? Like, tell me, what are things that you feel are going really well? What are things that I could help you with? All right, let me show you this test. I want to remind you that this test that you're taking only validates how well you did on this test. It doesn't validate how smart you are. So I'm going to show you this results. I want you to tell me how it makes you feel. Based off of this last iReady exam, you scored on a second grade reading level. Talk to me more about that. This is where they'll say, I really struggle with this. I really struggle with that. Some of the questions were like this. Some of the questions were like that. How does that feel that you're on a second grade level, but you're in fifth grade? Some people say, I really struggle with reading. Reading's on my best. Some kids aren't aware that they're reading that low. So sometimes it motivates them. Sometimes you get kids who shut down. And that's where my relationships save me. For my kid that shuts down, it's all right. I'm here. We're going to work together. Here are things we're going to do. I'm going to assign the audio to you on Monday, and then we're going to read the actual text on Tuesday. When we write, I'm going to make sure that you have an additional 10 minutes to make sure that you know exactly what the prompt is. I'm going to come to you first so that you're clear on the directions. Letting them know, them not knowing how to read isn't their fault. Someone has to teach you how to read. You just don't wake up and learn how to read. So I also give them that reassurance on the skills that you need. I know how to teach. So I'm going to make sure that I go back and do the work so that you can succeed. I had never taught second grade before. I'm teaching myself how to blend. I'm teaching myself these diphthongs and all these different blending strategies that I've never done before. But I also explain to my kids, I don't know this. So I'm going to make sure I do the work and we're going to learn together. I'm going to make sure I go home today and I learn these vowel teams and I learn this. And I'm going to be ready for you on Monday. And then they walk in so excited on Monday because they're like, my teacher just spent her weekend learning vowel teams and controlling R's to help me succeed. That partnership with your kids too on letting them know, I got your back. We're going to do this together. You need to do your part because I'm going to do my part. It builds this confidence or this motivation to keep them going because once they see a small bit of growth, that's all they need. They need growth to show them, okay, this is working so that they keep going at it.
Now, what happens when you have a student who they're really progressing? Is there a capability to move between groups?
Yes, I shift my groups based off of classroom observations. So the actual iReady exams we take quarterly. So sometimes I get friends who I'm like, Joe's been working really hard. I might be able to move him to third grade. I'll give him a quick assessment. It'll be a quick cold read and a quick comprehension on third grade level. And I'll give it to him independently. And I'm like, hey, Joe, here, work on this. I don't tell him it's third grade, but I'm like, work on this. I'll collect it at the end. And say if it's 5 questions, if he gets 3 out of the 5 correct, I'm like, okay, he's ready. Let's move on. If he doesn't, that tells me he's not ready just yet. Let me keep him here. I also don't tell them, hey, Joe, this is your chance to move, because I also need to show me what he could authentically do. If I tell him, it's going to change the dynamic. I want to see if you want this on your own, if that makes sense. What self-motivation do you have to prove to me that you can move to this group? Because I don't want you to try your best and then barely make it. And then I move you and then you're struggling to keep up.
Yeah, I think that setting those expectations is so important. Ezera, you've been to lots of reading professional development. What are the general things that you're like, hey, I stopped doing that and I'm glad, and here's why?
Giving my kids work and just sitting at my desk thinking that they would get it done. What I stopped doing was saying my kids couldn't do things without teaching them. Instead of saying like, well, they can't do that, they're not on 5th grade. I've changed my mindset to how do I get them to do this at a level that they can comprehend so that they can master the 5th grade. I never changed the plan. They always have to do 5th grade content. How do I scaffold it so that they could do it? So what I started doing is if I grade an assignment, I'm monitoring, circulating my classroom. I'm actively checking what's on your paper. So, all right, friends, we're working on number 1. You have 5 minutes. I'm walking around my classroom. I'm checking every paper. Good job, friend. I'm giving in the moment feedback. Good job, friend. Hey, let's look at number 1. Let's reread it. What did you forget? Go back, check it. So what this does for me, this is giving me in the moment data. I got my tracker. I'm putting all my notes on my tracker. By the time I get to kid 5 or 6, I already know how my whole class is doing. It's going to tell me, hey, do I stop right here and do a quick debrief? Or does this tell me that I could keep moving on? So what I stopped doing is waiting for the entire class to be done to go back and reread their papers, to sit down and grade everything. That makes no sense to me. If I accurately circulate while they're working, they're going to tell me in the moment if they get it or if they don't get it. I also stopped planning a whole week of lesson plans and then feeling like I have to get through it. Because if that week we're working on main idea, if on Monday they show me that they're struggling with key details, there's no reason for me to keep moving on with main ideas. I have to be okay with adjusting in the moment based off of the data. So Monday they showed me that key details was a struggle. Tuesday, I'm okay with readjusting so that we could go back and debrief and fix it. I think sometimes we over plan and then we're like, I just got to get through the lesson. But if they showed us, they didn't understand the lesson. So no matter how well you planned, the lesson's not going to be effective because they showed you on Monday, they didn't get it.
And formative assessment is that it changes our instruction. That's the artistry of being a remarkable teacher. Let's talk for 1 second about writing. What do you do differently in writing now?
In writing, I teach kids the way that I want them to write. And I know that other people have different opinions on it because they're like, no, students should freely write. They should write what their heart desires. But if they don't know what to write, you're going to keep getting nonsense. So I always start with giving a structure. So I'll say, hey, this is how we start paragraphs. We start with a transition word. Now, great, they have the option to choose their own transition word. But I also give a lot of sentence stems. Like, you're going to use sentence stems until you prove that you can write a paragraph on your own. And what I've noticed is that students will then start to get their ideas on the paper, and then they will move away from the sentence stems. That's a cue to me to show me it also really knows what they're talking about, because they're not using my sentence stems anymore. Because when you know what you're talking about, you get to the point. But for my friends who might need a little bit more support, those sentence stems allows them to just show me their thinking. I'm a big sentence stem kind of girl. I do give them, hey, here's what you're going to start with, and then build from there.
What does your workflow process look like for your lesson planning?
By the end of the day, I already know what needs to be done by the next day. During one of my preps, I'll sit and I'll look at my tracker and I'll be like, okay, I had a good 10 minutes to debrief this, but I might think that this might need a reteach. So then I'll look to see, what do I have so far planned for this week? What can I move around? And then in that moment, I'll determine, all right, you need a reteach plan. Let's go back into the drive. Do I already have a reteach plan? Do I need to make a new reteach plan? But by the end of the day, I always know what I'm teaching for the next day. I never walk into a class unprepared, not knowing what I'm doing for that day.
ELA teachers around the world are listening to you. Give them their motivational pep talk.
We have the hardest job. I don't care what anyone says. But the thing that you feel, I'm going to validate it for you. But I think that teaching your kids how to read, you're giving them the tool that will literally last them for a lifetime. So in those moments where you're feeling overwhelmed, or in those moments where you feel like your work is undeserving, think about that teacher that impacted you. Think about that person who took their time to teach you how to read. Your kids don't know that feeling that teachers feel sometimes, like being defeated. I really wanted to get this one student and I didn't get them. You can get all of them. And you might not get them in the version that you might think, but you just got to keep going. Your impact is seen every single day. And as you move year to year, you're going to know that your friends are reading because of those sacrifices that you did. Just keep going. And I think it's so cliche to say, but it's my friends who get it, they're going to get it. They're going to be like, just keep going.
One foot in front of the other.
Yes. And also leverage your community. Leverage the veteran teachers that you have in the building. Collaborate. I feel like community is what really drives results. Like, leverage the veterans in your building, or, hey, what's really working for you? What are you doing really well? Hey, how did you do this? I liked how you do this. Do you have a minute? Can I come watch you? Leverage the expertise in your building, because someone in your building already did it right the first time. So leverage that expertise so that you're working smarter, not harder.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge and the excitement and joy of what you're doing in your classroom. And congratulations.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
What an amazing hour we've had today, from executive functioning to reading, from math to differentiation to gamification. And Ezera Washington proving what's possible when we believe in our students. Thank you, Class Composer, for sponsoring today's show. Thank you for joining us today on Cool Cat Teacher Talk. For more episodes and resources, visit coolcatteacher.com. Until then, I challenge you to pick one idea from today's show as you work to be a more remarkable educator. This is Vicki Davis, the Cool Cat Teacher. See you later, educator.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Stay in the loop. Visit coolcatteacher.com. Follow @CoolCatTeacher everywhere you connect.